frustrations of life.
Aim high, stay focused on your career, whatever it is, you'll figure it out, but don't give up. Just keep pressing on.
While Duke is a former astronaut, he's also a pilot, husband, and father. During the Apollo 16 mission, he left one token behind, a photo of himself, his wife, and 2 boys.
On the back, we had written, "This is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke from planet Earth, who landed on the moon in April 1972, and we all signed it."
Although it would be shriveled up by now, it's a permanent memory for Duke, and it's the only family photo to make it on the moon. General Duke served as a capsule communicator on Apollo 11, the first American spaceflight to land humans on the moon. He also served as a backup lunar module pilot on Apollo 13 before arriving on the moon himself during Apollo 16. For WCNC Charlotte, I'm meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees.
Roger, Mark, 1 Bravo.
In fact, has turned himself in. Police say Jake Helen Duvall shot and killed 19-year-old Deontay Sparkman on Westwood Circle last week. They say he also shot another 19-year-old who survived. That investigation continues at this hour.
A rainy start to last weekend could mean you'll have a bit of standing water lying around your home. And as the weather starts to get warmer, you can bet that standing water will attract mosquitoes nearby. So this morning, Wake Up Charlotte's Megan Bragg is verifying the most common myths when it comes to these critters.
There are a number of myths that are out there, but probably about 4 of them that we hear the most.
That's Sloan Black. He owns Mosquito Joe in Southeast Charlotte. He's going to walk us through these myths and is one of our sources. Our other sources, the CDC, research from the University of Florida, and a study conducted by the National Library of Medicine. The first question, do all mosquitoes bite? According to the CDC, only female mosquitoes will suck your blood. Black says the reason, they need the blood to lay eggs.
The female can lay up to 1,000.
Checking audio again. I made some adjustments. Hear me any better?
You sound loud and clear, sir.
All right, thank you.
This is Phil Stewart from Reuters calling in by phone.
Okay, fantastic. I'm sorry, what was your name again?
First name Phil, Phil. Last name Stewart, Stewart.
Stewart from Reuters. All right, gotcha, Phil.
Hey, it's Caitlin Dornbos from Stars and Stripes.
Fantastic. Hi, Caitlin. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Hi, this is Travis Tritton with military.com.
All right, Travis, gotcha.
Hey, Stephen. Nick Wooten with the Columbus Ledger Inquirer.
All right, I got you, Nick.
Hey, Stephen, can you hear me? It's Corey.
Hi, Corey. I can hear you just fine.
Okay. It's not enabling me to turn my camera on.
Okay.
Is that something you're controlling?
No, it is not.
Okay. I'll bounce out and try coming back.
All right.
Corey,
Thank you.
Corey, this is Ty. I had to download the app, and when I did that, it worked.
Okay, I'll do that right now. See you in a minute.
Yep.
Hey, Stephen, are you taking a list for questions?
Disney got us $25 off the AirPods for Colin, so hey, I'll take it. I'll go those off a little later before I close it.
Can I go down and do this downstairs?
Yeah, fine.
I just don't want to lose it.
No, I understand.
Hey, Stephen, are you taking a list of names for questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Who's this that wants to get in the list there?
Yeah, hey, this is Matt White with the Forward Observer.
Okay, I got you.
Thank you.
If I don't get to you, we'll have an open floor period too.
Gilbert Bays with WRAL question also. Thanks.
Michael Perchik with WTVD.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Jason Brady from City View.
Okay, gotcha, Jason Brady. Thank you.
Yeah, the password didn't work for me. It just wouldn't let me log in that way, so I have to do it like this.
Okay. Yeah, a couple people have had some issues with it, but for the most part, folks have been able to get on. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. Please go on mute on your end. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Stephen, just making sure you got Gilbert Bays for a question from WRAL.
Gilbert, we got you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, folks, I've got 2 o'clock on my watch here, so I want to thank you all today for joining us at this media roundtable. I'm Stephen Baker, the Public Affairs Director for the Naming Commission, and I'll be your moderator today. So please be aware this meeting is being recorded for transcription purposes, and we ask that as a courtesy, you ensure your microphone or telephone is muted. This roundtable will last 1 hour, beginning with a statement from the Vice Chair of the Commission, after which we'll do some Q&As. Also, please keep an eye on your inbox. You'll be receiving a news release and materials related to today's announcement within the next few minutes. That email is going to include an official statement from the Commission's chair, retired Navy Admiral Michelle Howard, who is unfortunately unable to join us today. The announcement will also be posted on our website at thenamingcommission.gov. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the Vice Chair of the Naming Commission, retired Army Brigadier General Ty Sidgley. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Stephen. Good afternoon. I'm Ty Sidgley. Thank you so much for joining us. And let me introduce the other commissioners on the call, my colleagues, Mr. Jerry Buchanan, Lieutenant General retired Tom Bostic, the Honorable Larry Romo, and Dr. Corey Shockey. I know I speak for the entire commission when I say it has been our honor to serve. As Stephen told you, we are the Naming Commission charged by Congress to provide recommendations to change, modify, or remove assets in the Department of Defense that commemorate the Confederacy or those who voluntarily served with the Confederacy. As mandated by the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act, our final written report will include a list of identified assets, the costs to remove or rename them, the criteria and methods we developed to identify those assets, and the plan we use for collecting local sensitivities with regard to the naming activities. While that report is still in the works and due for submission to the House and Senate Armed Services Committees by October 1st, 2022, we have some exciting news to share with you today. But first, let me tell you briefly what the Commission has been doing since our last media roundtable in September. As we reported then, we were in the process of visiting all the Army installations under consideration for renaming: Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Gordon and Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Rucker, Alabama, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Lee, Fort Pickett, and Fort A.P. Hill, Virginia, and Fort Polk, Louisiana. During these visits, we had the good fortune, the honor, to meet and hear from hundreds of military and civilian leaders, as well as community stakeholders who share a deep love of their Army posts. At every visit, we heard how each community supports their post more than anyone else in the country, and we can't disagree. Community support was rock solid everywhere we went. Our visits to the posts were absolutely crucial. First, because Congress told us to listen to local sensitivities. And second, because the Army posts and their surrounding communities are inseparable. We had to hear their voices. So let me address the communities directly. We listened and took your suggestions back with us. You informed every part of our deliberations.
Well, my speakers on, my headphones.
Also in September, we launched our public website, which we use to gather recommendations from the public. I'm sorry, somebody has their mic on. If you could turn that off. Thanks. Let's start that paragraph again. Also in September, we launched our public website, which we use to gather recommendations from the public. Wow.
Muted.
People delivered. We received more than 34,000 submissions for renaming. In combination with the valuable feedback from the local communities, we narrowed our list to 3,670 unique names as possible contenders for use in naming DoD assets. At the beginning of this year, we began developing a short list of less than 100 new names for the installations through careful review and deliberation, which we announced in March. And then in March and April, we met again with community groups at each installation through virtual engagements. In fact, every name either originated from or resonated with the local communities. The feedback we received assisted us in narrowing the options and proved vital in helping us reach our final recommendations. The Commission met in person earlier this month for deliberations on the final name selections. And let me tell you, this was no easy task. We moved from 34,000 names to 3,670 to 87 to our final recommendations. For our final recommendations, we aim to find names that would inspire soldiers, civilians, families, the community, and the nation. One thing became clear. We found far more heroes than we had opportunities to name. So many members of the Army family exhibited the indomitable spirit, dedication, and heroism beyond the call of duty. In all ranks, in all roles, we found members of the Army family who exemplified the spirit of the nation and the values we cherish. With the names we selected, we hope to inspire today's soldiers, civilians, families, and communities with stories that resonate for all Americans. We wanted names and values that underpin the core mission of the armed forces, as our sacred oath demands, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies. We believe that these new names will inspire soldiers to achieve the high standards demanded by their nation in peace and in war. I speak for all 8 commissioners when I tell you it is our honor to unanimously recommend these names, names that reflect the very best of the United States Army and the United States of America. Here are the names we recommend. For Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Moore, after Lieutenant General Hal and Julia Moore. That's right, we recommend the name honor both Hal and Julia. General Moore served the nation for 32 years, most famously in the Battle of Ia Drang in Vietnam in 1965, for which he received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal for gallantry in combat. He also played a crucial role in the transition to the all-volunteer Army. Julia Moore served the nation just as much as her spouse. She changed the way the Army supported families. Before her intervention, the Army notified the families of casualties by telegram carried by cab drivers. Horrified, she started accompanying the cabbies to deliver the devastating news to families about their loved one. Her advocacy changed the Army and created the Casualty Notification Program and later Survivor Support Networks. With Hal and Julia Moore, we recognize the Army family that serves the nation together. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Liberty. There's a reason why liberty is written in our Declaration of Independence and Constitution, set onto our currency and germane to our national symbols, statues, and monuments. Throughout our history, liberty remains the greatest value. Ever since the nation created a standing army to provide for the common defense, that army's greatest battles have been for liberty. In the Revolutionary War, United States soldiers fought to establish liberty for our nation. In the Civil War, they fought to achieve liberty for all Americans. And in the Second World War, they fought to expand liberty throughout much of the world. This post is home of the Airborne and Army Special Forces. The 82nd Airborne song, which I sang so proudly when stationed there, has a line that says, "We're all American and proud to be, for we're the soldiers of liberty." And liberty anchors the Special Forces motto as well. In the 21st century, Fort Liberty symbolizes the U.S. Army's defense of that which we hold most dear. Fort Gordon, Georgia. Fort Eisenhower, after General of the Army Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower spent a lifetime in service to the nation, starting as a West Point cadet in 1911 and finishing as president 50 years later. Of course, we know Eisenhower best for leading one of the greatest operations in military history, the D-Day landings in Normandy on June 6, 1944. Before the assault on Fortress Europe, Ike penned a short letter taking personal responsibility if the D-Day landings failed. He truly lived the Army values. As Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, he understood how to bring together services and nations around a shared mission. Later, as president, relying on his military experience and keen judgment, Eisenhower led the nation through a perilous period during the early years of the nuclear age. Eisenhower also had a very close relationship with the greater Augusta communities. Fort A.P. Hill, Virginia. Fort Walker, after Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. Walker served as a doctor in the U.S. Army during the Civil War, the Army's first female surgeon. After one battle, she remained with wounded soldiers after the U.S. Army unit departed, disregarding her own safety. The enemy captured her and she spent 4 months in a prisoner of war camp. She received the Medal of Honor after petitions by Generals William T. Sherman and George Thomas. No women were allowed in the Army during the Civil War, but she insisted on serving even though she could not wear the blue uniform. She represents the millions of civilians who have served the Army and the nation in peace and war since 1775. Fort Hood, Texas. Fort Cavazos, after General Richard E. Cavazos. A native Texan, Cavazos grew up on the King Ranch and attended Texas Tech. As a young lieutenant in Korea, he led his company on 3 separate charges of an enemy position. Then he returned to the field 5 times to evacuate his wounded soldiers before allowing medics to treat his wounds. For that action, Cavazos received the Distinguished Service Cross. As a battalion commander in Vietnam, he received a 2nd DSC for rallying his soldiers during an ambush and then organizing a counterattack. Later, he commanded 3 Corps, our premier armored force, at the very installation that we recommend should bear his name. And Cavazos finished his career as a 4-star general. Fort Lee, Virginia. Fort Gregg Adams, after Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. This installation is the home of the U.S. Army's logisticians. For this post, we recommend 2 extraordinary sustainers. Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg enlisted at the end of World War II at the age of 17 and attended Officer Candidate School when President Truman ordered the services to integrate. During his extraordinarily distinguished career, he commanded logistics units in war and peace all over the globe. Now in his 95th year, Lieutenant General Gregg continues to mentor leaders, soldiers, families, and the entire logistics community, especially at the post we recommend should have his name. The local community suggested we consider a hyphenated name. We thought that was a great idea and selected another sustainer as well, Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. When America was attacked in 1941, Adams left her job as a teacher to answer the call of duty to the nation. She became one of the highest ranking women during World War II. From 1944 to 1945, she commanded a postal battalion in Europe. Working under the motto, "No mail, low morale," Adams and her unit made it their mission to sustain soldiers at the front and keep the families at home connected too. Her soldiers handled more than 6 million pieces of mail a month, cleared a 6-month backlog in half the time expected, and delivered tens of millions of envelopes to soldiers in the field. Her leadership will inspire a new generation of Army sustainers. Fort Pickett, Virginia. Fort Barfoot, after Tech Sergeant Van T. Barfoot. On May 23, 1944, Tech Sergeant Barfoot was in northern Italy with his unit attacking a well-entrenched German position. Barfoot moved out alone against the enemy's left flank. He took out 3 separate machine gun emplacements, one after the other, capturing 17 prisoners. That was his morning. In the afternoon, the Germans counterattacked with 3 tanks. He took a bazooka and disabled 1 tank at close range, forcing the others to retreat. Before the day ended, he found 2 grievously wounded soldiers. He brought them to safety, crossing a mile of contested terrain. Tech Sergeant Barfoot received the Medal of Honor for his extraordinary heroism and would go on to serve the nation for 34 more years, retiring as a colonel in Virginia. Fort Polk, Louisiana. Fort Johnson, after Sergeant William Henry Johnson. This post hosts the Joint Readiness Training Center, one of the world's premier training sites for light forces. We thought it appropriate to name it after someone who could inspire the soldiers training there. Johnson's story is remarkable. On May 14, 1918, in France, a German raiding party attacked Johnson and another soldier. Despite a grenade wound, Johnson attacked the Germans. First, he threw all his grenades. Then he fired all his rifle ammunition. When he ran out of bullets, he used the butt of his rifle as a club until it was smashed to bits. Finally, he took out his bolo knife to save his comrade. He single-handedly engaged 24 enemy soldiers despite suffering 21 separate wounds. Teddy Roosevelt called him one of the 5 bravest soldiers of the Great War. Johnson received the Medal of Honor. He represents the indomitable spirit of the U.S. soldier. Fort Rucker, Alabama. Fort Novosel, after Chief Warrant Officer 4 Michael J. Novosel Sr. This post is the home of Army aviation, and no person better represents that than Novosel. He started his military career flying B-29s in World War II. As a 43-year-old reservist, Novosel volunteered for active duty, resigning his Air Force Lieutenant Colonel commission to join the Army as a warrant officer and helicopter pilot. He flew more than 2,500 extraction missions in Vietnam, rescuing more than 5,500 wounded soldiers. On one extraordinary mission on October 2nd, 1969, he saved 29 men despite suffering severe wounds. For that action, he received the Medal of Honor. Incredibly, on another mission, he rescued his son, a fellow helicopter pilot. Later, his son returned the favor, rescuing his dad. Novosel represents the many families who serve the nation. Naming this post after Novosel will inspire the next generation of Army aviators. Thank you for letting me share these inspirational stories of American heroes whose stories deserve to be told and remembered. Detailed information behind these names should be available now on our website and in the press kit Stephen mentioned was coming your way. Thank you. I speak for my colleagues on the commission when I say we are so honored to unanimously recommend these names, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Gilbert Bays, WRAL.
Hi, sir, Mr. Bays, Sir, General Sigilly, thank you. I'm going to call on a few specific reporters first for questions, then open it up to any others. As a reminder, please mute your microphone when not speaking, and also take a moment to first identify yourself and your news organization when asking questions other than the folks I'm about to call on. First, I'd like to go over to Lita with Associated Press.
Good afternoon. It's Lita Baldor with the AP. 2 questions. One, can you walk us through the actual approval process, how this will go to Congress, and when you expect these names can actually be formally designated? And then you mentioned that the communities played a role in some of these names. In all of these cases, can you say whether or not the community, that each name sort of was generated out of community recommendations, or in some cases were they pulled from the sort of the big list that you got? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that question. As for the process, the commission will make recommendations to Congress as mandated in the 2021 NDAA. From there, it will go to the Secretary of Defense, who has the authority to direct base namings. And as for the community, all of these names either were generated, certainly generated either from public comment or from the community themselves, but either they generated from the community or they resonated with the community when we went back and talked to them for our engagement. Remember, we started this process visiting each community, and then we went, after we got down to the short list, we went back to the communities to make sure that they heard our voice and we heard theirs. Thank you.
You can lead Jay Price from National Public Radio. All right, we don't have Jay. Over to Barbara Starr, CNN.
Hi, a couple of questions, if I may. Just to clarify on the process, you send them to Congress. Does Congress have the authority under the law to change those names, those recommendations, before they go to Austin? And does Austin have complete discretionary authority to then choose whatever name he sees fit? And let me just ask, if I may, a couple other quick things. Is it correct, we just want to check our history, this is the first naming of Army bases after both, for the first time after women and African Americans? And why for Fort Bragg not the name of a person? Was it too controversial in that community to choose the name of a person?
Oh, thanks, Barbara. So I'm going to go back to basically what the NDAA says. And so here's the per section 370 of the law. The Secretary of Defense is expected to implement a plan submitted by the Commission no later than January 1st, 2024, 3 years after the NDAA becomes law. While we anticipate that renaming activities would take place around that time frame, the role of the Commission is strictly to provide recommendations, not execute activities on behalf of the Department of Defense. For your second question, yes, it is the first named after African Americans and women. And for your third question, we listen carefully to the communities in every case, and certainly in the case of our recommendation for Fort Liberty.
Did you consider it was on your short list, of course, did you consider the name of Harriet Tubman for any of these? And if you did not, why not? And if you did, why was she not chosen?
We did consider her. She was one of the 87 names that was there. And what we found, Barbara, is that we have so many heroes. We found so many, and we have so few bases, so few posts to name them after. And so that we had to make very, very difficult decisions. And I'm so proud to be a part of the team that got together in a room and did this. And I'm also very proud to say that we did it unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Next over to Gilbert Baez, WRAL.
Yeah, this is can you hear me? This is Gilbert Baez. You hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you, Gilbert.
Okay, so two quick questions. First of all, you have a symbol that says Liberty. Is that what we're going to see at Fort Bragg as the new signage for Fort Bragg? And secondly, in talking with several people in this community about the selection of a name, you've mentioned the fact that there are a ton of heroes associated with Fort Bragg. I personally was stationed there, as a matter of fact, as a Ranger qualified officer. There's a lot of heritage that is associated with Fort Bragg's name. There was an opportunity to name Fort Bragg after Everett Bragg, which would have, it was also a general, which would have stopped from having to change the name of Fort Bragg. He was a general in the Union Army as opposed to Confederate, and that name was not selected. And what thought has the commission given to the fact that changing the name at any or many of these installations is going to have on the communities in terms of changing street names, businesses, and other things that are associated with the name Fort Bragg in this particular community?
Good question.
Thank you so much. The first one is we will certainly, part of our remit to Congress is to give a complete accounting of the costs. We don't have that ready yet, but we will in the final report that's due to Congress on October 1st. So the second one is, again, we listen very carefully to local sensitivities. That was part of our remit from Congress, and it was certainly something that we did when we visited the community there. We certainly listened and had a great meeting, several meetings with the Fort Bragg community. So we had the last one is about the changes that will occur at all of these places for those outside the gates. And we heard from every community that they were concerned about the costs associated with this. Unfortunately, we're only allowed to take up the costs that will be affected by the Department of Defense. However, we will ensure that in our report that we give the feedback to Congress about the costs associated with this outside the gates.
All right, one follow-up question, please, if I may. Fort Bragg is the only post on the list not named after an individual. The reason we're here is because people have found fault in the name. Are you concerned that people will find fault in all of the names that have been selected for the other military installations?
Do I think that people will disagree with some of our conclusions? I don't doubt that at all. Again, we have so many heroes in this country. That's one of the things that we all found, is that we had so many American heroes, so many soldiers and family members that contributed to this country in ways that really astonished us and gave us great heart. I mean, we really, the heroes were almost endless. So it was so difficult to come up with a final list. But I'm proud to say we did that as a team, and we did it unanimously.
All right, thank you for the question, Mr. Bays. I'm going to circle back now to Jay Price, NPR. All right, Jay, I see you're on and I see you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you, so we might have to get you later. Over to Caitlin with Stars and Stripes.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Yeah, so can you talk about the process and the next steps coming up in the future? I think you briefed on that earlier, but I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Well, we still have work to do. So we have to finish a written report that we will work on over the next couple of months to ensure that we meet the deadline set by Congress by October 1st. And that's really our main job, is to do that. And then the commission, once it makes its recommendations to Congress, as mandated in the 2021 NDAA, it will then go to the Secretary of Defense, who has authority to direct the base renaming. Our job is to provide a recommendation and a plan, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Caitlin. Over now to Sid Christensen, San Antonio News.
Thank you very much. My question really comes down to this. We have like 32 members of the military who were Medal of Honor recipients from the San Antonio area alone. And one of them was Roy Benavides, and a lot of people talked about Roy being the guy who got the name at Fort Hood. How close did he get?
Sid, thank you for that question. I will go back to say what I said before. We had so many heroes that we could have chosen from, and Roy Benavides is one of those. We listened carefully to the community at each place, and we came back and tried to do the best we could to find names that would inspire Americans. But are there other names that would also inspire Americans? My goodness, there are so many. And I really, his name, like so many others, are on that list of 87 that we was our short list. And if you want to see some great stories in American military history and in our nation, is to go back and look at more of those names. Thank you.
Let me follow up real quickly. You say that Roy's name was on the short list. Was Milton Lee on the short list? and Jose Lopez, who is another San Antonian. We have a lot of interest in those guys, but I wonder if they also made the short list.
I'm almost I know Milton Lee was. I know that Benavidez was. I believe Jose Lopez was as well. But I don't have the list in front of me right now. But that list that we have of those 87. Oh my gosh, the courage, the tenacity, the selfless service, above and beyond the call of duty, were so evident everywhere we looked in American military history, and particularly for the history of the Army. It really was. It took our breath away, really, to read about all of the stories of these great Americans.
Jose Lopez was considered at Fort Gordon. He was on the list for Fort Gordon, a short list.
Thanks so much, Larry.
Who's this speaking?
Oh, that was Mr. Larry Romo, who is a commission member.
Thank you, Larry.
And also a San Antonian, I might add.
Yes, sir.
All right, Sig, thank you for those questions. We're going to go over now to Abraham Kenmore with Gannett Newspapers in Georgia.
Good afternoon. Thank you for doing this briefing. Two questions, if I might. First, there's a long list, about 750 other assets that are under consideration. Might any of the names on the short list wind up going to streets, hills, the various and sundry things there? And secondly, you mentioned that one of the other names under consideration for Fort Gordon, I know there's already a hospital named for President Eisenhower. Was there any conversation about potentially choosing someone different, given that he's already honored at Fort Gordon? And is it possible to have the other names on that short list for Fort Gordon? Thank you.
As for the other 87 names, yes, there's absolutely a possibility of that. And as the second part, we listened carefully to the local community before we went back with to make our determinations. And we certainly understood that the medical center is named after Eisenhower, and we listened very closely to the local community. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Abe. Over now to Luis Martinez with ABC News.
Hi. I noticed that Fort Liberty, Liberty was the name chosen as a conceptual name, but on your original list of 87, the concept name was Courage and not Liberty. Can you explain how you evolved from Courage to Liberty? And the other question I have is, why were these final selectees part of the 34,000 that were originally submitted from the American public, or were some of them did some of them originate with you? Thank you.
To the first question, we went back to the local community and we listened carefully. So we added some other names when we went back to the local community and heard their things. So again, we went there over the summer. Then we opened it up to the American people, and then we narrowed it down, and then went back to the local communities, as was our remit from Congress to listen to local sensitivities. I want to just have everyone realize how seriously we took that remit. We read the law very carefully and wanted to make sure that we were executing what Congress told us to do, that we were executing the law, and local sensitivities was a part of the law. But by the time I'm telling you the truth, those 34,000 names now are all running together for me. So I'm not sure if every single one of them were there, but I know that by the time we got to our last engagements with them, that we made sure that each community understood which names that we were considering for their post. Thank you.
So can I just clarify then, are you saying then that Liberty originated from the feedback that you got at Fort Bragg, and had you come to them with the concept name of Courage, and that's how it ended up being?
I'm saying that at every post that we went to, and that post in as well, is that they gave us, when we went there, we heard feedback from the community, and we took that feedback back with us to ensure that we took local sensitivities into account. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Martinez, thank you for those questions. Over now, I want to check in with Suzanne Gamboa from NBC News Latino. I believe she's on the line.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes,
I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I just had a couple questions. You didn't address whether or not this is the first time a Latino, a base has been named for a Latino. So if you could also address that. And I'm just wondering, was the local resistance to Fort Bragg a resistance to changing the name to a Confederate name, from a Confederate name at all? And was there resistance to naming after a person of color?
I'll tell you that there is a National Guard post in Puerto Rico that is named after a Puerto Rican who was a posthumous Medal of Honor recipient in in Vietnam. So it is a small National Guard post there. And as for Fort Bragg, we went back to each post and had no, that I don't think that's accurate, but we certainly listened to the local sensitivities everywhere we went. Not just at that post in North Carolina, but everywhere we went.
All right, Suzanne, thank you. Over now to Tom Vandenbroek, USA Today.
Just to be clear here, thanks for doing this. Are you, when will you be announcing the names for the other streets, Navy ships, that sort of thing? When will you have final recommendations for that?
Thanks, Tom. Our final report will be to Congress by the 1st of October, as the law demands.
All right, thank you, Tom. We also have John Ismay from New York Times on the line.
I hadn't asked for a question, but if my my colleague Helene Cooper is on, please give.
Okay, we'll pause for 1 sec. All right, we'll move on. If you've got a question from New York Times, just drop us a message in the chat or pipe in when we open up the floor. Over to Dana Lynn McIntyre, the Augusta Press. All right, nothing heard.
I'm here. I am here.
Go ahead, Dan.
But I'm going to defer to my colleague. I'm just sitting in. I've got to rush out to a meeting. I'm deferring to my colleague, Joshua Good, who you will look down the list and he's there. But thank you very much, guys. I've been very much informed by this to this point. I got to jet to my meeting.
Thanks, Dana.
All right, Joshua Good, Augusta Press.
Hey, thank you, gentlemen and ladies. I have no question. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, and do we have the New York Times coming in with a question? All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and open up the floor to any additional questions. I've got one from Defense One. Let's see, that's Jacqueline from Defense One has a question.
Yeah, this is Fulton Felcher. Just a quick clarification. Will these names actually have to be approved by Congress, or is this something Austin can do regardless of Congress's say?
Okay, yes, thank you. So the commission makes its recommendations to Congress as mandated by the NDAA, but it goes from there to the Secretary of Defense, who has the authority to direct base renaming.
Okay, and then we've also got a question for clarification from Kevin Barron. Kevin, do you want to go ahead and ask that question?
Well, it was kind of the same thing. I'm hearing that it goes from Congress to the SecDef, but so does Congress doesn't have any kind of approval or denial authority? It just funnels through them? I think that's what we're trying to get at is, can Congress do, or can any members of Congress do anything to block these names from going to Austin's desk?
Well, we do not tell the United States Congress what to do. We're a commission, and per Section 370, the Secretary of Defense is expected to implement a plan submitted by the commission no later than January 1st, 2024, 3 years after the NDAA became law. And while we anticipate that renaming activities would take place around that time frame, the role of the commission is strictly to provide recommendations, not execute activities on behalf of the Department of Defense.
All right, yeah, that's still unclear for us, but I guess we'll have to ask Congress. Thank you.
All right, we've got a question from Nick Wooden.
One more time, is that the Secretary, just want to make sure the Secretary of Defense has the authority to direct base renaming.
Thank you.
All right, Nick Wooden with Ledger Inquirer in Columbus.
Hi, I had a question about the choice of Fort Moore for Fort Benning's renaming. Obviously, I interviewed the family, and the whole thing behind their campaign was basically, hey, we want to honor the military family. This is what makes our proposal unique. There are a lot of really worthy names, but this is what we think makes ours, I guess, the best. What sort of thought process went into choosing Fort Moore as the name? Did sort of honoring the military family play into that?
We looked for inspirational stories, and the Moores, Hal and Julia together, provided an incredibly inspirational story, and to recognize the Army family in a way that we felt would inspire Army families, soldiers, communities, and the nation.
Also, let me add, Hal Moore was no slouch either.
Dr. Shockey, would you expound on that a little bit more, please?
As you can read in the bios that are in the press kit, Hal Moore was an outstanding and inspirational soldier. And so we wanted to both recognize his amazing service and also the excellent work for military families, especially during the casualty notification phase that Julia Moore provided to our Army family.
Thank you for that. That's something that their son highlighted a lot, and it was cool to see all that. But thank you.
All right, next up, I've got a question coming in from Heather Mongilio with the USNI.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if you could talk about the process for looking at the 2 Navy ships that have ties to the Confederacy. And I know that you talked a lot with the Army bases, but now that those will also be included, what did you look at? What names are being considered? Anything you can share about that process?
Thank you. A great question. I'm glad you asked that. It will also be in our final report.
Just to follow up, can you share anything more about like what you're doing in preparing for that final report about those 2 ships?
Right now we have not completed our work on that, so it will be in our final report. Really, today is about the 9 posts and the ships and the many hundreds of other items will be in our final report. Thank you.
All right, now we have a question up from a Matt White with Coffee or Die magazine, North Carolina.
Hi, thanks. A couple of my questions actually got answered, so I appreciate it. But I don't want to run you guys through who was the finalist in each spot. Everybody has their favorite. But I think there will be a lot of interest on the Liberty name and the several people that were talked about a lot for Fort Bragg and its ties to the Special Forces community. So you mentioned Benavides earlier. And Mr. Romo, you were good enough to give us a quote finalist or shortlister for another base. Could you discuss any of the sort of short list at Fort Bragg?
I will expound on it. We gave a lot of we had a lot of input from all the communities on all these names to include Fort Bragg. They had their military, the civilians, and the community leaders there, and the invited guests at Fort Bragg for our second listening session were very, very adamant about the name Fort Liberty. I mean, there's great candidates. Benavides would have been a great, wonderful candidate there. If you review his bio, he spent a lot of years there. He was Green Beret, Special Forces, Airborne. But also, there's other people like Colin Powell, Audie Murphy, Daniel Inouye, many people like Ty said, Saduli. We had a lot of heroes out there. Many of them were duly considered for the military installations to include Fort Bragg, but we gave a lot of deference to what the Fort Bragg community wanted for the people that were invited there. That's what I'll say. Thank you.
If I would just say, in terms of short lists, I would refer to the names that went out to each of the installations. And it was published publicly, but I would say by and large, anyone who was 10 names of any one of the installations would have been a great selection. It's just a tough choice working within the commission and then hearing the local sensitivities to try to get them into the proper name, proper fit for the community and for the nation.
All right. Thank you for the questions. Folks, just a heads up that we've got about a little less than 20 minutes left in today's roundtable. Next up is Courtney Cube from NBC News.
Hi. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what the chances are that these names will stick. Have you already notified? I mean, I'm assuming before you came in and gave us this and sent out this press release that you've already talked to Congress, that you've already gone to the Secretary of Defense and run these names by. I mean, do you get the sense that these are likely to these recommendations are likely to be the selections?
We're, as a commission, our job is to do the best we can to come up with great recommendations. That's our job. And then to come up with, to do what the law says. And we really can't control anything other than that. And I think I'm really proud of the job we did to come up with these names to represent the American soldier, the American family, and the nation.
But have you notified, I mean, have you already provided, I'm assuming you told them about these names and you guys have gotten some feedback already, whether it's from the Secretary of Defense or the Pentagon or from Congress before you made your final selections. Is that fair to say that there's already been some like back and forth or some feedback with the essentially the people who are going to approve these and then ultimately and enact them?
Our mission was to come up with these names, and we did notify HAS, SASC, and SecDef very shortly before we came on with you. We were given the mission by the United States Congress to do this mission, and we have worked assiduously to do that over the course of the last year. So we're, as the 8 of us who, 4 appointed by House and Senate Armed Services Committee, 4 appointed by the SecDef, came together to create these names, and we will give those to Congress and to SecDef.
The one thing I would add is that the commission has been able to operate without any undue influence from anywhere. The Congress has allowed us to do our job. The SecDef has allowed us to do our job. We've come up with these names, and now we're into the hard work of putting the report together, committing that.
I would answer it this way. This is Mr. Romo. The people that we selected, if you go back to the communities, they were really the top choices of the communities. So if Congress goes back, the representatives for those communities, they're going to see that the communities clearly were for these people. So it's not like we pull the names against the community. So that's going to be a good favor on our part, because the communities will be pleased with the names we selected. I can say that much. Thank you.
All right, so next up, we've got a question from the Washington Post, Karun Demirjian. Apologies if I butchered that last name. Hi, Karun, if you're speaking, we can't hear you at this moment. Let me see if you're... Okay, we see you muting and unmuting, but still not able to hear you, sir. Maybe if you send me your question via chat, I'll ask it for you. In the meantime, let's go over to, I believe we had Davis Winkle with Military Times was next.
Hey, thanks for putting this together, everybody. My question is with regard to the process of determining Fort Bragg's name. As another questioner pointed out earlier, Liberty was not on that list of 87 finalist names. And it's our understanding that it was during your commission's kind of final visit to Fort Bragg that stakeholders, both the ones in uniform and community leaders, kind of made a last second sell that won y'all over. I'd appreciate if y'all could talk a bit about what that pitch looked like and how it ultimately won over the recommendation for you.
I would say that, like we did for every other post, we went and listened to local sensitivities, and we listened there carefully. And they told us that Fort Liberty was Liberty was a name that we should consider, and we took their consideration seriously. So at every place we went, we listened to local sensitivities, and Fort Bragg was no different.
Thank you, David.
Just reinforced that there was some development in the communities over time. The more they thought about this, the more they came together as a community. We saw some changes in views from the first session to the second engagement with us. There were some communities that moved from the very
God damn it, Henry.
what they would like to do and how they would like the community installation to be named. There were others that went back and forth. Fort Bragg is not the only place that thought of a purge as something like value or something other than a person. But even in those other communities where something like that came up, there was a settling process that happened, and eventually the communities came together. I wouldn't characterize it as a last minute effort to try to convince the commission. We really listened to them and we watched them develop over time as they came together as a
Well, to add to Tom's statement, this is Jerry Buchanan. At every post that we went to, we brought forth to the community and to the post that the choice of a value of a person, pros and cons of values. Sometimes there doesn't represent the story, and it does. However, in the case of Fort Bragg, it fits in perfectly. The other side is individuals. 20 years from now, if maybe this individual 100% acceptable right now, might not be 20 years from now for whatever reason. And the communities pondered this, and that's how they came back recommending to us either names of a value or of a person.
All right, thank you, commissioners. We've got a question now from Kroon over at the Washington Post. Could we see if your mic is working now, sir? Okay, it seems his mic is still not working, but he did send the question to me, so I'll ask on his behalf. The question from Washington Post is, you referred on several occasions to the communities having informed your decision. Can you be more specific? Who did you define as the community, and how do you go about polling the community? Or how did you go about polling the community?
Yeah, it's a great question, Karun. Thank you for that. We started with the post commander, mission commander at every post, and we asked him in this case to go through and make sure that they got a broad representation of all sorts of voices, diverse voices, political voices, leaders of faith, those soldiers on post, leaders on post. So we asked, and they delivered to make sure that there was a broad range of voices, because you're exactly right. The community can be narrow or it can be wide, and we certainly think that we got a wide selection of community voices because we asked those questions because the post commanders helped us deliver them.
Please mute your mics if you're not on.
To add what you just said, on one of the community gatherings that we did, as a matter of fact, reported Texas, the different organizations that were there representing a section or a segment of the community, we were told, thank you so much for letting us be part of this process, instead of just saying, this is the way it's going to be, letting us have some input on it. So the community felt like they actually had a voice within process, of which they did.
All right, we've just got a few minutes left here in the roundtable. Do we have any additional questions? Let me check the chat here and see if we had anybody else coming in. So we'll open it up. Folks who dialed in via telephone, I know you can't use the chat, but is there anybody on the telephone lines that had a question? All right, I've got one coming in from Rachel Riley at Fayetteville Observer. Rachel, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And I know we've kind of talked a little bit about Fort Bragg, but I'm going to also ask about that because that's the local community that I cover. And one of the questions is, during a public roundtable, the veteran community spoke up here with a name and not a concept. And so when y'all came back in March and April, us as media, I don't think any of my media colleagues, and myself included, covered any meetings where y'all met with stakeholders. So I don't know how public that was. So can you talk a little bit about, one, who was the stakeholders, and two, the transparency in this process? Because I do know there was websites where communities could weigh in, but public meetings, I've only seen one locally.
Well, thank you for that question, Rachel. I think that we again went through the mission commander on the post, and none of these sessions were open to the media. They were all closed to that, but they did try to make a broad representation within the community. So, but again, community is such a large, it can be many different things. But when we went back to Fort Bragg, we did feel like we got a broad representation, both on post and off post, but that was led by the mission commander.
All right, thank you for that question. General Sigilly, there's a follow-up question from Karoon, whom I must apologize to for having misgendered. She would like to know, was there racial and gender diversity among the people at the meetings?
Yes.
At the community meetings?
Yes. There was. And I will tell you that depending on when the post we were, we had LULAC there. We had a variety of different folks, both from the faith community as well as other groups. So yes, we did.
All right. And Suzanne from NBC, you had a question. Suzanne, did you want to go ahead and ask that one?